We start by listening to a story that Jesus told. It's in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, 26 to 29, a parable about a growing seed. Then Jesus said, "This is what God's kingdom is like. It's as though someone scatters seed on the ground, then sleeps and wakes night and day. The seed sprouts and grows, but the farmer doesn't know how. The earth produces crops all by itself. First the stalk, then the head, then the full head of grain. Whenever the crop is ready, the farmer goes out to cut the grain because it is harvest time." Well, we're thinking about parables this month. Today's parable is pretty seasonal. It's time for planting fields, and soon it will be time for planting gardens and flower beds, if that's something you do. In fact, my niece has been planting seeds that will be transplanted once the danger of frost is past. Please let that be soon. And so I borrowed a couple of her plants today. They are beans. She planted these two, actually a day apart. And interestingly, she planted this one first. So it's had the extra day for growing. Why is one bigger than the other? We don't know. Why is the second one that was planted the one that has grown more? No idea. And why are they flourishing the way they are? Thankfully, these ones were put in a pot instead of the little dirt cups that everything else was planted in. Could that be part of the factors? I don't know. We can't know. And Jesus says, this is what the kingdom of God is like. You plant a seed and you don't control the growth. You don't define the timing. You can't predict the results. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't find that particularly comforting. The uncertainty of this particular time in the world is not my favorite thing. I find it so hard to make decisions when I can't predict what that will mean, when I can't know the implications of the decisions. I have this bad habit of sort of assuming responsibility for the well-being of the universe, or at least my part of the universe. So living in a time of pandemic has done a pretty good job of pulling that rug right out from underneath me. Right now, I hardly control anything. I don't have the answers to most of our common questions. So, does the low number of COVID cases recorded in our province mean that we are less at risk than other places? I don't know. Does it really help anyone if you wear a mask? I don't know. Will there be a second wave more dangerous than the first? I don't know. When will we be able to gather in groups again? When will we be able to sing together again? I don't know. I don't know. Which of the countless webinars that are available to me right now to learn stuff are worth my time and energy to watch them? I don't know. And if we come to a point where we can be together in the church sanctuary again, and we decide that we should live stream so that those who are still more at risk can participate virtually like this, what equipment do I need? How do I use it? I don't know. I imagine that you understand this feeling in some way. Some of your questions will be different and some of them the same, but the "I don't know" refrain is pretty universal in this moment. And Jesus' response to that seems to be, the kingdom of God is like that. Well, good grief. Faith is supposed to be helpful in these difficult moments. How is that helpful? Well, when Jesus told this story, he was speaking to people who understood and knew insecurity. failed harvest and famine were common. Only a few very rich had the resources to insulate them from these things and the ability to buy their way through to a kind of guaranteed safety. So he is speaking to people who regularly feel out of control. When Mark told this story of Jesus, he was comforting a different group of people, but also ones who felt insecure. It's believed that Mark's gospel was written around the year 70 CE, shortly after the Romans destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. It was a time of danger and persecution for those who were loyal to the Jesus movement. Much of what they tried did not work out. The new church leaders often felt vulnerable, helpless, and wondered whether anything they were doing was worth the effort, making any difference, or was even the right thing to do. So it would appear that this story is meant to be heard by people who feel the way we feel right now. It's not really for people like me when I'm feeling in control, with all of the resources I need to insulate me from vulnerability and purchase a kind of safety from harm. Well, it might also be for me then too, but the truth is, in those moments, I'm not likely to pay attention. I'm not likely to be focusing on the uncertainty of life and living because I think I've got it all under control. But right now, I'm aware of the uncertainty. I do not have it all under control. I can't make it all better. And Jesus' parable is not meant to relieve that, or give me or anyone control. Rather, it is inviting me to let go of my desperate need for it. Because, after all, much of our sense of control is an illusion anyway. Think of the number of times when the weather or a medical emergency or an accident or some other unpredictable event shifts the shape of your life. It was John Lennon who sang, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans." It occurs to me that some of the wisdom of this parable is that it allows us to let go of the myth that it is possible to be entirely in control of our lives. There is much that is just going to be uncontrollable. And the goal of life isn't to change that. What if we let go of the idea that our responsibility in life was to control it, but rather that our task was to experience it, to live it? Now, if you're like me, it might take you a minute to realize those are not actually the same thing, but they are not. We can put down some of the burden of responsibility that many of us carry. It's interesting for me to think about this on Mother's Day, because I think mothers get this, or struggle with this. Parenting of all kinds is a great responsibility, and an exercise in trying to figure out the balance between controlling and supporting growth. And some parents are too controlling. They want to tell that seed exactly what kind of plant to become. And some parents aren't willing or able to help create good conditions for seeds to grow. And some parents struggle with patience. They're more like that child who planted the seeds but then got frustrated when the efforts to grow a plant were foiled by the fact that they kept digging the seeds up to see how they were doing. As much as what parents do matters a lot, in the end, they can't control exactly how a child grows. So if you are a parent who is doing everything you can to support your child's growth and well-being, but you are also carrying a burden because you think you're doing it wrong or aren't doing it enough, or feel overwhelmed, or just feel like you don't know what you are doing in these moments, I wonder if you might hear this parable say to you, it's okay. It's not only up to you. And you can try and control your children's universe, but you won't likely have much more success with that than controlling your own. It's not that there isn't responsibility, like with this plant. There is a planting task, and in this case there will be a transplanting task to get it into the earth, them into the earth. But then the job will be to wait until it does its own growing. And we can weed it, and we can assist with watering if we don't have enough rain. But the earth and the plant will control the growing. And it turns out that when we're not trying to control everything, we can find more acceptance of others and other people's ways of doing things. We can allow ourselves to be surprised and accept unexpected blessings when they show up. And others don't feel like they're letting us down simply by being themselves. Because that's a thing. When I try and control you, you get the message that I don't trust or like you the way you are, even if that's not at all what I mean. Christine Carter suggests that this parable calls us to acceptance and surrender. Not resignation, not abdication, but she points out the wisdom that what we resist persists. So when we repress or deny our emotions, they generate a greater physiological response than if we simply feel them. And feeling them doesn't mean they go away, but we do feel them for less time than if we try and push them away. And when we let ourselves feel what we feel, we can process what is happening for us, and we have a better chance of not taking that out on those around us. And when we accept the fact that our control is limited, we simply face reality for what it is, it sort of softens us and opens us to compassion, to wisdom in places we didn't see it before, to hearing wisdom from places we wouldn't ordinarily even listen. When we let go of our anxiety about not knowing, we develop a greater sense of trust, or we can. A trust that whatever happens, we can handle it. If it fails, if it doesn't grow, if it disappoints us, we can endure the emotions of grief. We can find another path forward. We can trust that we're not alone. That's another piece of wisdom in this parable, that the work of God is something often hidden, not easily perceived. When Jesus told this story, when Mark told this story, they wanted the people to know that their efforts were not in vain, even if it didn't work out. That God was present and active, even if they couldn't see it. So that, frankly, if they weren't going to help God, at least they might get out of God's way. And that if they could let go of the responsibility for growth, they could use the energy they did have for planting seeds, looking for fruit, and harvesting what they found. And if they did that, the harvest would never disappoint them, because they could see it as a gift for which to be grateful. So, what does that offer to us for life today? Well, I think that we too can be comforted by the idea that the work of God goes on, whether or not it is highly visible. In fact, we might stop looking for it in the places of high visibility and look for it in the forgotten corners, in the failures below the surface. I can always use the reminder to have more patience and respect for hiddenness and insignificance. And when I let go of the burden of responsibility for all things, for the things I don't know and can't know, I discover that I can still plant plenty of seeds and not worry so much about whether they root or whether they don't. Because I don't have to worry about being blamed if they don't grow. And neither do I have to spend time blaming anyone else. It just is. And what if, instead of worrying about growth I can't see, I started looking for the places ready for harvest? And it won't be obvious to me because I'm not expecting to look for that. I'm gonna look for grain or fruit that looks like success to me. But in Mark's gospel, this story is followed immediately by a story about a tiny mustard seed that grows into a weed that becomes a great bush that can be a home for birds, just like a tree. Who would have guessed? A weed, a tiny little seed. I hope that as we go about experiencing life in this pandemic time, when we find things that are ready for harvest, we receive them as gifts that make us grateful. What are they? Where are they? I don't know. But that's okay. I'll have to go looking. Because like these beans, they're growing somewhere. Thanks be to God.